Good evening, everyone. Today is the 20th episode of Season 2 of ABCDE. ABCDE stands for Academia, Business, Consulting, Development, and Entrepreneurship. We have a very special guest today, all the way from Nagaland. On behalf of the team at HR at 8 p.m., I welcome Mr. Niketu Iralu, a true blue Indian, to talk about something we all want to be the change. We draw inspiration from Gandhiji but never had the opportunity of meeting him. Today we have the privilege of listening to Niketuji live. He epitomizes the spirit of be the change you wish to see. Very rarely we find someone who's done it all. Otherwise, we only get to read such stories in books. So Niketuji, thanks for giving us your time to inspire us today. I'm feeling so overwhelmed introducing a great man like you. I was reading one of your articles where you mentioned how the night before a critical event involving 1,000 odd people from 50 tribes, and I hope you describe it in your talk today. You went to bed praying, and I quote, God, tomorrow morning you tell me what I should say and I will follow you. When I woke up and prayed the next morning, the thought came to me. End quote. Well, something similar happened to me last night. I thank God for giving me an opportunity to be the host of an event featuring you. And here I am going to talk less and listen more because I'm inspired by another pearl of wisdom from your article. To be able to listen has been one of the greatest instruments for change in our society. Tonight, we will be enriching ourselves with many more pearls of wisdom from you. Our moderator for today is Avani Vansia. She will soon introduce Mr. Niketu Iralu in more detail to the audience. Avani is an HR professional with 18 years of experience, 15 of them with L&T. She is currently pursuing an executive master's program of change from INSEAD. She is champion of gender diversity and inclusion, cultural transformation enthusiast, talent facilitator, and a passionate storyteller. She had attended one of Niketuji's sessions recently and found it very relevant from the point of societal change. She was associated with the Initiatives of Change organization and reached out to Niketuji through a common contact. It's very kind of Niketuji to agree to share his experiences in this forum of HR at 8 p.m., which happens to be the brainchild of Indranil Banerjee. Before I turn over the floor to Avni, I'd like to inform you that this session is being recorded. In order to keep the background noise to a minimum, the mics have been put on mute and the moderator will take up questions on your behalf. Please keep writing in the chat box. In case you want to ask the question yourself, please raise your hand and your mic will be unmuted. I'll be summing up after the Q&A round is over. Before Avni introduces Mr. Iralu, I'd also like to mention that the HR fraternity lost a very distinguished and respectable gentleman, Mr. Kamal Singh, on 26th October. In his memory, I would like to propose a 30 seconds morning session, starting now. Thank you. Over to you, Avni, to introduce Ms. Niketu Iralu.
Thank you very much, sir. It is indeed an honor for all of us to welcome Mr. Niketu Iralu to this session. I think Mr. Bhatnagar has already introduced him to a great extent because this is a gentleman here for whom his work speaks for who he is. But still, I would like to give some more information about him that would help us put things which he's going to talk to us about in perspective. Mr. Niketu was born in 1935 in fact, Nagaland, studied in Nagaland, Guwahati and Madras University. Since 1957 up to today, he is a full-time honorary member in Moral Rearmament, MRA, which is now called Initiatives of Change. For those of you who do not know about this organization, it is a worldwide movement of people in diverse cultures and backgrounds who are committed to the transformation of society through changes in human motives and behavior, starting with their own. This entire concept of starting with self is the most wonderful concept this organization speaks about, and this is one thing which Mr. Niketu has lived through. In 1995, he returned to Northeast India because there was trouble brewing home and there were various issues which he felt were better addressed if he was back home with his own tribe. Uh, there, he continued the program of FIOFC, mainly in the search by tribes and larger communities for healing of divisions to bring out a wider common stability that would make economic development and proper growth possible. For the same number of years, he is a counselor for drug and alcohol addicts. And with Naga Mothers Association and Kripa Foundation, he has also established Mount Gilead Home, the first professionally run center for counseling and rehabilitation of drug and alcohol addicts. He is a well traveled person. In fact, he has worked in all the states of India except of Jammu and Kashmir and Tripura. He is well traveled across the world. So he has been in North America, South America, various countries of Europe, Asia Pacific, Australia, has worked around those places and met a lot of people in the world. But the basic human being, the spirit of change that he brought in his own self, from being called an outsider in India to establishing himself as a core citizen of the country and bringing out the Nagaland development. So there is a huge amount of work that he has done along with his beautiful wife Christine. Both of them are now settled in Sechuzuzba near Kohima. So let's listen to his story. He has requested that to start with, he will have his opening statement. There will be some question and answer. So I have few two choicest questions from some of the stories that I've heard from him about him through my MRA association as well as otherwise. As well as if there are any questions from the audience, we would take those up. It's going to be a wonderful storytelling session, I can assure you. And I'm sure all of us will go back with a lot of positivity and integrity out of this session. So over to you, Mr. Iralu.
Thank you very much, Avani, Vansia, and Mr. Bhatnagar. And you have given such a magnificent introduction, very generous words. I'm glad we could start by remembering your member who passed away recently. I'm sure you will let the family know how much we share their loss. I'll just start by reading out a few points I've written down and then go on to discussions. It is a real privilege for me to be invited by Avani Vansia, our moderator, to participate in this conversation with your group tonight. I'm conscious of the demanding role you play every day to care for the people whose happiness, satisfaction with their own lives, and their growth as human beings will decide what kind of society Indian industry will produce for herself and for the world. The role indeed is demanding, as India has emerged as one of the superpowers of the world, and the world expects so much from India. I think, first of all, the effects of our region, comprising the 8 sister states that we are called. I think you know them, but Sikkim, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, and Nagaland. There are estimated 220 ethnic tribes and nationalities. And the Manipur, no, Sikkim, we are related to tribes, as I mentioned at the beginning, and nationalities in Tibet, Myanmar, Bangladesh. Population of our region is said to be 39 million people. That's a 2011 census. And then 56 million people in 2019 census. Something is happening there. Assam has the longest link with Indian civilization and history, followed by Tripura, Sikkim, Meghalaya, and Manipur. The isolation of the Nagas, Mizos, and the people of Arunachal from the rest of Asia, from all our neighbors, was near total for many, many centuries. And until the arrival of the British in the early part of the 19th century, we had no connection with anybody. We were just neighbors to one another. And that's from where a lot of our troubles come today. There are so many facts that we can discuss, but we have no time. So I would like to say that the main point I want to draw your attention to is this: the struggle for aspirations of the various communities that you've heard about. They have produced so many mistakes, because when human beings struggle for their aspirations, they make mistakes immediately. In our case, we are required to respond to so many changes. We make mistakes all the time because we have no experience from the past. The result is we begin to be divided among ourselves. And today we have become a very divided communities within ourselves. And unless the wounds and the hurts we have caused to one another, unless they are healed by our own change in ourselves, we can keep blaming the rest of India or somebody, or blame one another. But the result will be we can produce killing fields in due course, like what happened in Cambodia, or in Sierra Leone, or Liberia, or Rwanda, and Burundi, Uganda, all that you know. I find that in the latter part of the 20th century, the world suddenly realized that things can suddenly go very wrong and killings can go out of control. And this is the thing that I tonight want to draw our attention to, this thing that can happen. And we are very near to, as I said, we are part of Burma in many ways. And what has happened in Southeast Asia, we know. And I do not want to see that Northeast India will become part of that kind of unmanageable crisis and violence and destruction. It can happen. The thing to do is that we bring healing to the hurts we have caused to one another. I think that's why, because if we can do that, the communities of Northeast India were related to Sikkim, were related to Bhutan, were related to Nepal in all kinds of ways, right up to Ladakh. We can be a bridge between the huge civilizations of India and China. We are part of them in different ways, or we can be destructive. Cause destructive situations where instability can make development impossible, and then you know what that can happen. I mean, that is the thing that I want to have as in our minds as we go into our discussion. I went to Madras, as some of us discussed earlier, and I went away at a time in 1955 when some of my closest friends had started to go to the jungle to fight the Naga struggle. My mother's younger brother, Azet Fizo, is regarded as the father of the Naga people, and he was the one who launched the Naga struggle. He was away in Burma from 1935, the year I was born, till 1946 when he returned. He cooperated with Subhash Chandra Bose. And he and his brother went to jail because of that. But they were not hanged by the British because they could not prove that they came to Nagaland when the Japanese invaded Kohima. And the Battle of Kohima you heard about, that's when we began to experience great changes impacting us, and we not knowing how to respond to them. Anyway, so when I went to Madras, I was very conscious of the reason why our people are fighting for our aspirations for dignity, for our identity, self-respect and recognition, and so on. At the same time, I was very conscious that we were just emerging as people, and we had no experience to confront the world, and we had a lot of unhealed fears, hates among ourselves, and then deep resentment against the rest of India because of what has started to happen. And it was at that time that while my friends went away to the jungle, I was meeting new ideas. I think two things made an immediate impact on me. First was reading Mahatma Gandhi's My Experiments with Truth. I cried as I read it because I said, here is one Indian whose people I hated, whose lives, whose unselfishness, whose honesty, whose truthfulness thoroughly challenged me. And it was so irresistible. And then soon after that, I met the idea of moral rearmament, now called Initiatives of Change. The idea of moral rearmament, simply as Avani said earlier, is to remake the world, a very big idea, but starting with yourself every day. By accepting the change that be the change, as it was said earlier by Mr. Bhatnagar, be the change and be committed to that and just keep at it. Because I think that you gradually discover that's the only worthwhile thing to do. And but it means that you change every day, and with that freedom and that experience of liberation, you are able to create new relationships. Hope comes when people are able to trust one another, and possibilities for growth comes. Anyway, that's what I experienced. I think the things that were very important for me were that the still small voice, listen to the still small voice. It tells you immediately where you need to be different. Be part of the problem or be part of the solution. And as I said, the experiment with truth that Gandhiji wrote, I began to see that I was a very ordinary person, but I was an individual who needed to start a change in himself. I wrote a letter to a Nepali family in Kohima because they were richer than my family. The father was a compounder, chemical compounder in the hospital where my father was his boss. But because he had a shop also, they were richer than us. Our family at that time, to 11 children with my parents, we were always short of money. And I said, these are the people from outside. They are the people who are exploiting us. And the thought came to me to say sorry to them and be the change there. And so I wrote a letter to Sher Bahadur Chetri, and I told him about my father, myself, and I said, I have wished destruction for you and your family. I am sorry, please forgive me. I am wrong, I am sorry, please forgive me. There's three magical words. I I learned more and more about the power of these small steps. And then I also got completely honest with my father. I wrote a letter from my college. My father was in jail as a political prisoner because his wife's younger brother was Fizo. And my father had just retired as a medical officer of the Assam Medical Service. So he was in great despair and bitterness. I told my father the times I had cheated and the things I was ashamed of in my life, really ashamed of. It was very difficult for me, but again, the still small voice said, this is where you start. You see where others are wrong and you say so many things about the wrongs of others, but this is where you're part of the problem. So when my father read the letter, he wrote back. I was very surprised. He said, dear son, thank you for your courage and honesty with me. After reading your letter, I began to face how you, my children, have felt about the way I have treated your mother. He was referring to the times a mother cried in the kitchen, cried often because father will say very harsh things to her, saying that what has happened to the salary I earned this month? It's all disappeared. And this will make us very angry, very sad, or cry with mother. And we all went to church on Sundays where we sang loudly and did all the things that Christians do. But at home, situation was like that. So my father, when he said, I know how you, my children, feel about the way I have treated your mother, I was so surprised. I said I was telling him where I was wrong, not thinking of anything on his part. But he started to think of where he was wrong in his relation, the way he had treated mother. I was so amazed. I said, maybe I am being shown a roadmap to follow, the path I should follow very seriously. I could not treat it lightly. A very small experiment. And I could not do any mathematics at all. So I cheated once in exams, and in mathematics, I got 86%. And my teacher was very surprised, told the whole class. Anyway, that again, that was a very small experience. But for me to tell the truth to my mathematics teacher, they were very small experiments. And dealing with my selfishness, because the first thought I got when I was silent and listened to the still small voice, the very first thought which I actually wrote down was, you are a very selfish man. You are jealous of other people because of your selfish nature. And I wrote them down and I shared. And that's how I began to see that a human being, all human beings are important, all are responsible for what should happen in society. But those things begin, of course, these initial steps of change in my life did not change Nagaland or India or the world at all. But I experienced where I was fighting the eternal battle between good and evil. And from there, I said, it is being the change you want to see in the world means this. In such little things, they become bigger things as you go along. But if you're clear on these things every day, you begin to find your hope in you is alive, and you pass it on. Others say, if that fellow can be different, there's hope for me. See, hope and trust starts. I think that's the main point I'm trying to make about my initial experience. And that's how I began to see the road I was meant to follow, and I started to work with my friends of Moderator at that time, all over India, as earlier said. And I decided to come back. Another thing I must mention, in Madras at that time, at the public meeting, I apologized to the people of India for my hatred of the rest of the people of the rest of India. Again, that was a very small steps, but for me, a thing like that opened a door to something new in my life. And as I discovered later, I became free from my hate and bitterness against others. And it's a long story, but with that, I felt I was ready to come back to Northeast India. And I came back. I started to come back in the 80s. And that's when the first thing I did was working to help establish the first center for rehabilitation center for drug and alcohol addicts with the Naga Mothers Association. And that led on to public involvement with public bodies in Nagaland. And that's how I ended up meeting with all the different underground leaders in Nagaland, in Manipur, in Burma. And I'm committed to this process of getting down to the hurts we have done to one another, and so that we bring healing at that level, and so that trust will be restored, our relationships will be restored. And that's what I am engaged in. I think I'll stop here, and maybe in questions and answer we can go on to other points. Thank you very much.
So, Niketu, very nice to see you. This is Anil Sachdev.
Oh, Are Baba. Rajesh's brother.
Yes, Rajesh's
My
brother.
God, I was just talking to your brother the other day. Oh, what a wonderful man he is. And you, I'm glad to see you. Yeah, go ahead.
Rajesh is also
Oh,
there.
Rajesh is also there. Okay, that's
Rajesh
wonderful.
is here. Rajesh.
In fact, when they knew that you were coming to speak, sir, I think Mr. Anil Sachdev first mentioned that, yes, he had worked with you and Rajmohan Gandhi in the MRA. And he also referred that you are a very good friend of Mr. Rajesh Sachdev, and then they decided to join.
Oh,
and
yes.
It's such a pleasure. And I'm sure they can add to the texture of the story which is being shared. But what I see in the chat right now...
Rajesh knows all about us and he still loves us. That's a wonderful thing about him.
I think that's the beauty which your story is all about, isn't it? I mean, to acknowledge your inner voice, to speak that, whether it says the positive story or the challenging or rebellious story. In the chat box, we are getting so many responses saying that the honesty with which you are sharing is astounding. I remember what you've shared at many places. You actually refer it to Robert Orr, but you say that hurt, when it is not transformed, gets transmitted. I think the Naga reconciliation story, which Mr. Bhatnagar mentioned in the beginning, also probably somewhere has these roots. You shared a lot of story in terms of sharing when you were hurt, and when you're holding it in yourself, it was creating negativity. But when you apologized and spoke out to the other person and reached out, and that made you free. And that made the whole relationship better. The trust got established.
It started,
the entire story of you coming back. I mean, you are coming from a legacy. Your uncle Fizo was a charismatic leader, and there was a lot of, if I may use the word, burden of that legacy on your shoulders when you had to go enter into that meeting. But you still decided to follow that small, tiny inner voice. So would you like to share that entire story with the audience? Because many of them would not know the story, and I think it is very inspiring for everyone to know.
Oh, yes. This was, Rajesh will know about it. It was the formation of the Naga Ho-Ho, means all the Naga tribes became part of Naga Ho-Ho. It's called the Apex Organization to which all Naga tribes belonged. And while it was being formed, about a session in Mokokchung, central Nagaland, it was a time of great violence at that time. And I was asked by the president, who was going to be the president of that session, to be one of the speakers. And he said, we must get the 3 of you from different parts of Naga homeland to speak to our people because we are in the process of destroying ourselves. And I was afraid because a number of my friends have been killed. And my family said, lie low, don't be so foolish that you should say anything, lie low, don't go there. But I felt that it would be I would be an insult. I would hurt the president of that tribe who was going to chair the 3-day session. So I decided that I must just see what my reply should be, because my 2 friends had said that they were not going to come for various reasons. And so I said, tomorrow I must give my reply to the president of the Chakasan tribe. And that night I tried to think what I would say to him, but I found I could not get clarity because of the confusion and fear and all the things I heard from my family members. So I said, God, good night. Tomorrow morning at 5, you'll tell me what I should say. And so next morning I got up. My sister made tea for me at that time. And I sat down. I said, okay, here I am. What is this inner voice going to tell me? The first thought came to me, prepare your speech that you will be ready to give. And then tell this man that you will go with him and you will be led by his decision. If at that conference, on the eve of that conference, report to him, and if he says the situation is too bad, you mustn't speak, sorry, then don't speak. But if he says speak, stand with him. I felt completely at peace. So I got my points ready. And then my fellow tribe leaders said, we will go together with you in a convoy and all that. We went there. And the president of the session, he said, tomorrow you must speak all that you have in mind, because over 1,000 people from all tribes in Nagaland, in Burma, Manipur, Assam, Arunachal, all are here. It is a very critical time. So I stood up to speak. I said that I cannot speak for others, but at least I must speak about my own tribe, my family. And I said that from what I've heard from the NSC and IM leaders, my Mr. Muiva and Mr. Isaac Su, from what I've heard from them, Uncle Fizo, they wrote to him 3 letters and waited for 2 years, no reply came to them. Muiva was the General Secretary of the Naga National Council, Fizo was the president. Fizo was in London in exile. And they say that he never replied to them, and therefore they could not continue with that kind of treatment from him. And that's how the split started. And so I said, if it is true that he did not reply to their letter, he was wrong. And I'm sorry, he was wrong. And then on another point, I said he was wrong. 2 or 3 points I said. And at that time, people became very quiet and said, who is this fellow talking about Mr. Fizo like this? So I said to myself, what do I say next? And that thought came to say this. If heaven is what we say, we believe heaven is, I'm sure Mr. Fizo is very, very happy. We are talking about his mistakes this morning. The whole crowd clapped and the meeting opened in a way I never expected. Then the questions and answers went on and on. And I realized that if you really do what you are shown to do by the still small voice, it always challenges you. The other voice tempts you, but the inner voice challenges you. And I found that the whole gathering responded to it, and we began to ask questions that were deep inside us. And after the 3rd day, the conference ended, and we were all going home. On the way, we stopped at a place to have tea and some food. one of the leaders of one of the tribes returning, I think, to Burma. He said, "Uncle, we have attended so many of our Naga conferences. We never tell the truth. And the result is we're losing hope. This time you told the truth, and therefore we're going away with hope." For me, that kind of thing transforms hate, transforms hurts. And how that has to be kept going and going if we're going to prevent violence taking over because of hatred and distrust. I think that's what rather long story I've told.
It's a marvelous story, and I've heard this number of times, and every time I hear this story, I get goosebumps. I can tell you that, because I feel that when one individual shares or gets courage to share his or her inner voice, that gives permission sort of to all others to share their inner voice, or at least listen to their inner voice. A lot of us in this group are HR and IR professionals, and we keep talking about building trust, but I think this, what you shared, is the foundation of building trust and building a relationship that has hope for the future, even when you have difference of opinion, but there is still hope for the future. So it's an excellent story. And I want to hear a lot more stories from you, but I have a question from the audience, which I think it's fair for me to ask you.
Yeah.
So Indranil ji is asking a question that, sir, you have worked in almost all states of the country.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the central philosophy of our country that is keeping us one and unique? If you could share some of your special experiences, that would be extremely useful for us.
I think, well, I think India is a nation that has going through processes of change for such a long time. I think the religious roots are very strong that bind people, and the philosophy that has emerged, developed out of the saints and sages, thinkers, all kinds of characters, have brought India together to a very a powerful civilization. But I think also one thing the caste attitudes are still very strong. Caste attitudes very strong, and that's where we feel that the rest of India looks at us and say that whatever history you may have is not important because that you're so small. That kind of attitude we meet. One time, a governor of Assam and Nagaland, a very highly well-known personality, he told me that I think the Nagaland problem will be solved if all the Nagas are just removed to all the cities of India and other parts of India, and they're taken away from their home. And then there will be a solution for Nagaland. And I looked at him and said, my gosh, that's what he thinks. And he's one of the policymakers of India. He makes policy for the government of India. And so we have a sense of our understanding of our own history, which to us is the only thing we have. And if we are deprived of that sense of our own identity, we will just end up creating troubles and nothing else, only trouble and troubles. And we will be the ones who will be destroyed, not others. But that will not be good for anybody, not good for us, not good for Northeast India, not good for Burma, not good for India. And therefore, that hurts must be healed, but the initiatives have to be taken by us because we have an understanding of our own history. But we must be worthy of our aspirations. We have become a people who are not worthy of our aspirations right now because we have not dealt with selfishness, greed, dishonesty, corruption. All kinds of things are very, very serious. So we have high aspirations, but we are not worthy of them. Through change in ourselves, we will get the others to listen to us. That is not taking place at the moment.
So I think it's very expansive answer that he has given, and probably he has already, while sharing it, shared his own expectations from all of us in terms of if we want to live the life of our aspiration, that's the distance we have to travel. We have a lot of other interesting questions. One which is right in front of my eyes is from Dr. Akhil Basrai. He says that uh, how did you deal with the small voice when you started hearing it for the first few times? I'm sure over a period of time it would have become a practice, but those first few incidences, there must have been a battle between should I not? So, can you share a little bit about it?
Well, I think I learned from my friends who were associated with me, who were trying to help me also, that any thought pays enough attention to them. And the thought, as I said, that came to me dealt with my selfishness, my fears, my hates, things like that, and the shameful things I was doing. And I also reading Mahatma Gandhi's Experiments with Truth. The way he dealt with them, we all know them. How he was honest about something he has stolen and that sort of thing. I realized that I needed to deal with what was real in my life, not talk about other people's problems. But I dealt with this by, as I said, writing a letter to my father, getting honest with my mathematics teacher, apologizing to Sher Bahadur Chetri from Nepal in Kohima. For me, it was a stepping out into the unknown. But I think if I had not done that, I would just be full of ideas that will not help nobody, and that certainly not help my people.
I think this is a wonderful
I think
message.
obedience.
I think it's a wonderful message, and if I may take this liberty, I think if all of us who are in the audience today, whatever small number we have, if all of us can try and do one act of listening to our inner voice and working on that, I think that would probably be the best response and tribute to Mr. Niketu Iralu, what he's speaking. I think that one small action has a lot of potential, and I'm sharing it by experience, that it really gives courage. Now, again, for want of time, there are two questions which are more talking about the philosophy. So I'll just put both the questions together, and probably so you may like to respond. So one question is that what message you would like to give to the youth with respect to your philosophy on hope, trust, courage, and change. And another question, which is not exactly the same but related, is that if you were to share a sense of life in one line, what would that be?
A sense of life in one line. I think be willing, be open, and be willing, and be honest. That curiosity, that willingness, I think willingness opens up the whole world. And you will see suddenly everything becomes very full of possibilities. But if you say, no, I will not do that, no, I will not do that, no, because of my hidden agendas, nothing happens. I think that would be my sense of life. I think in our rehabilitation center, we have a notice on the wall for all the addicts who are trying to recover. We call it the HOW formula of life, HOW, honesty, openness, willingness.
Wow.
And I find that willingness can open things up, or it can kill everything.
I think that's an interesting, and I think this is an acronym which we can put on our boards: honesty, openness, and willingness, all in the right direction. And I like it that it starts with honesty, because it sets the direction, and after that, openness and willingness. I mean, If it was the other way around, it would actually be taking us in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
Um, right. One more question I would like to take. Just one moment. And the response is pouring in, sir, in terms of how this is an excellent story, serving for well-being of all. Um, I think I'm missing one question in between, which I'm trying to locate. Um, okay, so you have been inspired and impressed by Mahatma Gandhi, so much so that for your honeymoon you and Christine went to Porbandar. Actually, you came to Porbandar, right? So
That's right.
that really speaks of how impressed you are with the philosophy of Gandhi, and you also said it in so many words in your opening statement. So, if you had to talk about one message from Mahatma Gandhi which has lived by you and which you think is the most relevant in today's time.
Well, I think be the change, as we said at the beginning. Um, he said, the still small voice is the only tyrant to whom I bend my knees. I think that is the challenge for everyone. And what can happen if we will adopt that and say that I will learn to rise to that calling? I think what will happen to our society? The still small voice is the only tyrant to whom I bend my knees. I would say that is the fascinating challenge every day.
Right.
Otherwise, in no time, I'm a slave of myself immediately.
True. So I think that still small voice is something which is coming up very strongly, and of course, it helps you be the change you really want to see. Indranil ji has posed a second question, which he had already posed earlier. I couldn't take. This forum is predominantly of HR professionals. How do you think we could support industries and professionals of different states of seven sisters, eight sisters actually? Any touch points for each of the states?
Or for each of our states.
Yes. Or collectively, I mean, whichever you feel appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have to start with building up a network of people who are committed to the idea. And then concentrate on the growth of each one. Then something can happen. Otherwise, we all live with just wonderful slogans. I think that's what we have, an interesting group of young people. They call the outreach group. They come from all the different states of, most of the different states of Northeast India. And they also come from as far as Ladakh, Nepal, and that far, and Tibet. And what we are doing is going to each of the different districts, different states, and to discuss how we bring change to Northeast India, which we've not done before. We've only been shouting our slogans for ourselves and then call buns to one another when we don't like our neighbors. But we realize that's not sustainable at all. So there's a deep understanding, awareness that we must create a wider common stability, as I said earlier. And for that stability has to be created by the change in all of us. And that will make us all responsible for one another's growth. We're not growing. And we're just becoming more and more corrupt. But that sense, I find, is something in the nature of human resource development. But our house in Zubza, our house is called Karanyaki in my language, means a house for listening. The only point I have to say that my wife often says that, you know, the name of the house is house for listening, you're talking all the time. So, but these young people, they come, and before the COVID-19 came, they were meeting frequently, sometimes 15 of them staying together here and creating their message, their deepening their own understanding of life of issues in the world, Northeast India and the rest of India, and then actually going into the different states, meeting the different tribes, and sharing from what they have started themselves, and then learning from those other people's, wrestling with their problems. And I think that, I hope that is linked to your question. That way, I think we will meet this issue of human resource development. But it has to be always something that gives hope because of those who are doing it. Their lives demonstrate what can happen, the potential of what can come out of the changed lives. And it may appear very small, but in no time, the impact goes very wide. And I think the point is the power comes from the fact that people find hope when they started to put things right themselves. And how we help one another to keep, developing our common humanity, our common need, our common aspirations. All aspirations are important that way. And then human beings relate to one another at the level where society can grow properly.
I think you made so many points in this answer. I think you talked about acknowledging the unique identity that each one has, connecting with it with the others, and creating a bond such that both feel respect for each other, feel respected by each other, and in the process create hope. And I think one positive move, as you said, can have a far-reaching impact. I think that's a message all of us can take. That can we really create those small wins, small stories of hope that can actually be widespread across. There are some other messages which probably will take offline for offline discussion with you, and I'm sure that will take us the story forward for all of us as a community. I could listen to you forever. In fact, I know you still have many, many more wonderful stories, but we are really at the end of the time.
God bless you, Niketu. Wonderful, wonderful. God bless you.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you, Anil. And to your brother.
Thank you.
In fact, today in this session, I acknowledge presence of so many of our senior members. We have Dr. T.V. Rao with us. We have Mr. Akhil Basrai. We have Mr. Anil Sachdev. And all these senior leaders who are in their own capacity, they are sort of leaders from whom we have learned, and they have come and joined us and blessed this session. So thank you very much. Sir, I just wanted to hand it over to you, Mr. Bhatnagar.
Thank you, Mr. Niketu Iralu. You have really transformed our lives in 1 hour. There are so many pearls of wisdom we can take with us, and each is worth $1 million. So we are already very rich with all the knowledge you have shared with us. How do I summarize something so valuable? Let me make an attempt on what I took away from this session. Your first sentence itself was, we used to keep making mistakes all the time as we didn't have an history to refer to. So you kept making the same mistakes all over again. It opened my eyes on how history is so important to society. Second, healing the hurt caused to another person. How important is that? How you feel the hurt leads to honest conversation to happen. Third, any disruption in the area of 8 sisters can cause a hindrance to the development of India, as the entire region all the way to Ladakh is critical to balance the relationship between India, China and Burma. I hope our policymakers also give due credence to the progress, peace and harmony in these states. Fourth, you had mentioned model rearmament. What an apt name, model rearmament. Your conversation focused on be the change and be at it on a daily basis. One is to rearm oneself on a daily basis on model values. Great, wow. Then this mention of small voice. We tend to forget this very important part of us. We always have the option of finding problems or looking for solutions, but when we hear the inner voice, we will lead to finding the solutions approach. You took a very brave step on hearing your inner voice to apologize on your own mistakes through a letter to your father. Later, you wrote to the Nepali family and apologized for all the violence and bloodshed that had happened in the past. And they forgave you. You must have felt so light on losing the toxic waste which had accumulated within. That is the kind of weight loss we should be aiming for, not the one which is focused on diet, exercise, and all kinds of exotic food. And then you apologized to your maths teacher after you had secured 86% marks through cheating. He too would have forgiven you and felt good that somewhere his teaching triggered the inner voice within you. You mentioned so beautifully that where your hope is live, trust starts. Wow. That's where hope and trust interrelation was experienced by you and shared with us. I hadn't used the two words in one sentence. I learned from you now. Avani mentioned that what is not transformed is transmitted. That's what the world is suffering from right now. We're not transforming, and every hurt is getting transmitted from one generation to another, one caste to another, and don't seem to be getting anywhere. Then came the famous example of you lining up to give that speech to 1,000-odd people in the midst of lots of external voices, which you didn't hear or didn't care. Your friends were asking you not to go, yet you went and spoke freely. You apologized and you created that humor, and suddenly our honest conversation started. That change happened because you had earlier transformed from within by the apologies that you had rendered, and that's where the honesty came from within. I'm a great believer in the energy and wave theory, and I do believe that your vibes reached across to a large populace and made a difference in their lives. Otherwise, there's so many good orators around, speak very well, get a rousing reception to their speech, but nothing happens after that. Speech ends, and that's the end of story. No impact, no change. I think you made the impact because you made the change within you. Finally, I was very impressed on how you elaborated on how HOW, honesty, openness, and willingness. That's a mantra we should all take forward. Now, I have one question for you. I've already gathered the pearls of wisdom which I could. There'll be many more. I'd like to know, how do I reach Nagaland? What's the best way to reach Nagaland? We are all talking of integration and would like to smell the air there. If you could go to Madras, I am motivated to come to Nagaland.
Come to Calcutta. All our flights come to Calcutta. And then from Calcutta, after 1 hour's flight, you are in Dimapur, Nagaland. And Dimapur airport is 51 kilometers from our home on a hillside in the forest.
Okay, fantastic.
Calcutta, Dimapur, Kohima. Yeah, Dimapur is our small airport where the flights come. Or you can, if you're in Delhi to Guwahati, direct flight. And then now we don't have a flight from Guwahati to Dimapur. That's why that's
Calcutta
it.
is the best route.
Yeah. But let me know when you're coming, I'll help you.
Mr. Iralu, whenever you're coming to Delhi, there'll be a number of people wanting to meet you to have a coffee pe charcha. So do think of us and make a program. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I think this is a beautiful integration, have the Indianness in all of us, right? I mean, when we meet people and then we instantly become friends, and the next thing we say is ki aap hamare ghar aaiye. Please come to our home. So we want to find way to your home, and we welcome you to all the homes all across India that have been there in the session today. I'll be noting down and sharing with you where all people participated from.
So when you come down to our part of the world after COVID, do let either Avani or Atul know so that we'll have the privilege to meet you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Very generous words. Thank you.
And we'll serve you South Indian food, don't worry.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Thank you.
Uh, uh, we would like to formally present a vote of thanks. So, in fact, Mr. Niketu, sometimes when people are not sure where he's from, he shares, he gives notations and says that he's part of this triangle from where 8 Nobel laureates have come. So
That's right.
today we are saying that we are from one quadrilateral. We have Mr. Bhatnagar from the very north. I am from the west. You are from the east, and the person who's giving vote of thanks, Mr. Ravindra Verma, who is a consultant in learning and development. He is from down south, so I would invite him to close the India loop and present a vote of thanks.
Niketu ji, namaste.
Namaste.
This evening we are all blessed. On this Friday, 29th of October, I thank God for giving me an opportunity to listen to you. You are such a honest, committed, inspirational intellect who preached peace and non-violence. Without any hesitation, I may be permitted to call you as Mahatma of Northeastern India.
My gosh.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I request all of you to make a clap. The hardship you have gone through in your childhood days, we read in your articles, in your interviews, we have listened to you, and I request all the participants to keep listening to all his videos, which are so inspirational that we are all privileged to see him live today. You listening to the small voice, feeling the wounds and hurts of the underprivileged, and working for almost 5 decades for their healing. Your service with MRA, initiatives of change, making all the tribes to come together, working together, transforming, understand one another, making the world come to know about the neglected region, dealing with the social issues, and what not. You have touched every corner. We promise that we shall take inspiration from your life and start doing good to this world. The inspirational we draw from today is giving is living, living is giving. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Today, it's not the time well spent, it's the time well invested. It's a lifetime event for all of us. Thanks to Indranil ji, Atul Bhatnagar ji, Avani for moderating this session, and all the senior professionals like, TV Rao Garu, Akwil Busrai Garu, Anil Sachdev Garu, and all the participants across India for participating in this session. We are all privileged. And this is the only HR forum, sir, HR at 8 p.m., which has India Connect flavor. We seek your blessings, and we wish yourself, your loved wife, and all your loved ones a happy and healthy life. Keep blessing us. Keep inspiring with all your works. We remain. Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Very well done.
Very well done.
Thank
Very
you
well.
so
Thank you.
much.
Indranil,
Thank you.
congratulations. Very well done, Verma ji. And Atul, beautiful session. I think you use the right word that it was a time invested. I wish it would have had much more time to interact with him. His simplicity, his genuineness is so infectious, sir. I'm not just praising you, Niketu, but I got first involved with MRA when I was in school. When Rajmohan Gandhi and Conrad Hunt, he was a West Indian cricketer in my time. And he was very actively involved. So that is the time I went to Panchgani, I think was the headquarters for MRA. And
Still is.
then involved. So, after all these years, so you have revived that fire in us. You really revived.
Thank you all so much.
Right.
You are
Thank
very,
you so much.
the whole day you are working, you come tonight like this. I'm very privileged to have this connection with you. Thank you so much.
Our privilege, sir. Our privilege.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very
Great
much.
privilege. Yeah.
Bye,
Okay.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Namaskar. Have a good weekend ahead.